Hi everybody, this is Damien from Legend Life. With our experience talks, we look to share with you tips, advice and inspiration to help you get outdoors and experience more. Today, I have the pleasure of speaking with Caroline Dawson, who is also known as SUP Lass. She's the founder of SUP Lass Paddle Adventures, a company based in northeastern Wales who offers stand-up paddling, instruction and coaching, as well as adventures. So how are you today, Caroline?
I'm good, thank you, Damien.
Very good. So to get started, maybe you can give us a little bit of a background about yourself and, have you always been into the outdoors and adventure?
Yeah, so a little bit about me. Well, as you mentioned, I'm found in Northeast Wales, and I like to sort of describe where I live as a real hidden gem. Everybody travels through my part of Wales to get to the rest of Wales, and we're really fortunate to have an amazing mountains, rivers, lakes. We've got it all right on the doorstep, and it's an area that I grew up with. So I've stayed in a similar area to where I was born. My family still live around. But for me, I have always been a very outdoorsy person. I I've always had sort of an affinity to the outdoors. I've been involved with sort of agriculture, farming. I've always ridden. I've had my own horse. I've then been incredibly sporty. So I've taken part in triathlons. I've ran. I really enjoy my cycling too. I'm just kind of one of those people that love being outside. I love camping, wild camping, bivvying. So it's anything really that's that sort of outside is sort of my affinity, my draw, and my passion really. So for me is my weekend. And I also have a sort of quite a high-powered, high-pressurized Monday to Friday job. So I kind of balance the two. So the SUP sort of stuff for me is my release and my focus, and puts me in a completely different place to where I am 9 to 5, Monday to Friday.
Okay. So how did you get started with stand-up paddling?
So how did I get started? Well, actually, I am, in the terms of sort of paddling, probably a relative newbie. I started paddling about 18 months ago, and it actually came about from my horse actually having a really bad accident, and I ended up having to have her put to sleep. And then I kind of said to myself, look, what am I going to do? I've lost my horse. I don't really want to get another one. What else is there I could do? And I know we're sort of talking about, the age of 40 and thinking about, what can we be doing? And I'm getting close to 40, and I thought, what sort of sport can I get into? So I went one day and I thought I'll go and give a bit of SUP a go. Went up to the local canal, just went for a very short taster session for an hour, and I was like hooked straight away. And that was 18 months ago, and that was the first time I stepped on a paddleboard. And it's just been a whirlwind journey to have got to where I've got to today. And when I look at sort of some of the adventures, the stuff I'm doing, it's just crazy to think about that sort of journey. And I think it kind of says, if you put your mind to it, you can really achieve anything in any discipline, in any sport.
No, brilliant. So, well, you've talked about some of the adventures. Maybe you can share some of the things you've been up to.
So, what have I been up to recently? Well, probably my biggest highlight was actually about a week ago. And one thing that I've always wanted to do is ride the boar. So the boar is a wave that comes down the river, and it's particularly on the big tide. So it's normally around the sort of autumn or spring equinox. So for me, I've got a river probably about 5 or 6 miles away, and it's the second highest bore. So the Severn in the UK is always the famous bore that everybody talks about. There's all the big waves and the surface that everybody run down, and the little River Dee, well, I say little, it's still quite a big river, has one too. So last week it was lunchtime, threw all my kit in the car, said bye to my work folks, drove down the river. And amongst all of the men, I was the only girl on the river. I decided to have a go at riding the boar, and it just blew my mind. It blew my mind. I've never seen a river behave in that way, with the currents. The waves, okay, they disappointed slightly. They didn't quite form because of the there's so many things that have got to be right. You've got to have your tide, your wind, even the volume of water that's coming down the river in the estuary. But we still had some amazing waves, and we managed to ride them, and just sort of stood in the middle of the river with the guys around me going, where are all the other women? Like, where's everybody else? And it was just then to come back as well, to sit back and work about an hour later, just back at my desk typing, thinking, I've just gone and done the bore on the river. So that was last week. So that was great. And this week has just been a crazy week of paddling. I've had a couple of days off work, and all Easter, I think the last 5 days I've paddled the 4 of them in just estuary. I love estuaries, and in all sort of different estuary locations around Wales, and dealing with some interesting wind and weather and tide, and all of that for me is just like the best doorstep adventures that you could ever imagine.
Okay, so where you are offers you lots of opportunities to go off and do stand-up paddling.
Yeah, there's always lots of opportunities about, and I try and grab them whenever I can. So I'm really fortunate. I've even got a muddy field about 2 kilometers away from the door that's recently flooded. And I'll even go and grab the opportunity to just go and paddle around the telegraph pole in the middle of the lake, or the muddy pond. But any opportunity I get, it could be early morning, after work, I'll just go and just grab some time to paddle. And I've even been known to put my head torch on and go paddle at night as well.
Okay, very good. So what would be on your stand-up paddling bucket list?
For me, my bucket list for this year and what I'm really trying to work towards. So I'm heavily involved with the Water Skills Academy, and I was the last person sort of just before this sort of current lockdown, in a sense, to gain my adventure guide qualification. So last year for me was all about qualifications. And to get to my next level, which is the Expedition Leadership Award, which in a sense is sort of like one of the highest sort of SUP qualifications you can get, probably globally, really. I've got to get in some time to doing overnight multi-day adventures where I maybe go out on my board 2, 3, up to maybe 5 days, carry my own kit, and looking for those. So this year, what I really want to do is get as much sort of overnight sort of camping trips in sort of more exposed, remote kind of locations. So this summer, that's what I'm trying to tick off. So I cannot tell you where that's going to take me, if I'm honest. I don't know yet.
Yeah. Yeah, well, I guess with COVID, it's kind of like hard to kind of identify locations. So you're just going to have to be flexible.
Yeah, definitely.
Cool. So, well, maybe now we can get started and talk a little bit more about, how do you get started in doing stand-up paddling? You're a relative newbie, so you've been through the whole process and then obviously upskilled yourself. So for anyone who doesn't really know, what is stand-up paddling exactly?
Stand-up paddling, that's actually a good question, Damien, because actually when you think about it, I suppose you've got to be almost as crude as it is just a board, and it can be an inflatable board or it can be a hard board, like a surfboard in a sense, and a paddle, and that's it ultimately. But then it gets more technical, and I think when you start, you very much think that's it. I just need a paddle and a board, and off I go.
Yeah.
But there's so much to it, and I think it's like anything. If you get into biking, if you get into all these sort of different hobbies, you start realizing there's better kit. There's like little tricks and tips and different brands, and there's all these things that just, from something that you think, oh, it's relatively simple, there's actually quite a lot to it. So that's the fundamentals, really. It is just a board and a paddle, and then it's the ability to paddle on. It can be the sea, the rivers, it can be lakes, canals. It just opens a whole new world of adventure, really, in a sort of I'd say an affordable and accessible way.
Yeah. Okay. So can anyone do stand-up paddle?
Yeah, I'd say everybody's. I've seen such a wide variety of ages, sizes, sexes, everybody gets involved in it. And actually it's something women in particular have really grasped hold of. And actually it can be as leisurely and as chilled out and relaxed with a dog on the front, or it can be full on national, international race level. You could be on a 21-inch race board giving it absolute beans. So there's something for everybody, I think, with SUP. And I think you can make as much or as little of it as you want to suit your own sort of physical need, I'd say. Yeah.
Okay, so regardless of your fitness level, you can, pretty much give it a go.
Definitely. And there's the option, you don't necessarily have to stand up. You can sit down, you can kneel. Again, what your physical kind of capability is, you can adapt and make the boards, in a sense, work for you. So no limitation at all. I think everybody could give it a good go. And I think most people could be stood up as well within an hour or two. I'd say you'd be pretty confident on your old legs.
Okay. So what do you think is the biggest challenge getting started?
I think the biggest challenge is actually, for me, it would be getting a reputable and really good quality advice. And I see it so often now as an instructor where people will just go and buy a board, buy a paddle. And I think, like anything, that if you go and just get maybe 1 or 2 lessons, it puts you in such good stead to then sort of develop your confidence, your safety, your skills, all the really important things that are really fundamental to getting the basics right. I think that really helps you. And I think my advice would be, even before you went out and bought a board, just go and get a couple of lessons, go and, word of mouth, find somebody really reputable, and just get a good solid foundation. And that then will put you in such good stead and probably make you enjoy the sport more, really, knowing what you can potentially get out of it.
Okay, so what are the key things that are likely to be taught to you in those first 1 or 2 lessons?
Well, I'd think about what I would teach people. So I think the real key thing for me is your kit and your overall safety. So you're aware of your board and your paddle, everything that sort of goes with that, in a sense of, your fin, your setting up, being very confident with that, and then making sure that you're safe. So have you got a PFD? Have you got all of your waist leash, for example, the correct clothing for the weather conditions, and having that confidence, knowing that you've got the right kit, you're safe, you know how to rescue yourself, if you fall off, how do you get back onto your board. I think for me that would be a real starting point, and actually doing a lot of that on the ground even before you got on your paddleboard to instill that confidence. And then the steps then for me would be obviously mastering standing up, and that's one thing that freaks everybody out when you first do it. Your toes are like claws sort of gripping on, and I remember that first few times that I paddled, that your feet were screaming because you were so scared of moving, and you were fixated on that one spot, that your arches of your feet were almost on fire. And when you look back now, I think, Christ, I skip all over my board. I run up and down it, I jump off it, I jump all over it, and I don't even think about my feet of where they are. But for a new person starting out, that for them, they need that sort of reassurance. But then, the basic paddle technique, so how you're holding your paddle, forwards, backwards, turning, getting on and off sort of safely. So 1 or 2 lessons of getting that real sort of grounding right just does go such a long way. And you can tell when, now that there's been such a big explosion of paddleboarding, and I don't know what it's like with you, Damien, but with us, every little bit of water you go on, there's always somebody paddling, and you can always tell the ones that have had maybe a few pointers or a few little lessons over those that haven't. And I think it really does show. Yeah.
Okay, so maybe you can give a few pointers on, as you said, like this overcoming the fear of falling off and then trying to maintain your balance. Because like I've given it a try a few times, and I can relate. Like my feet are kind of like holding on, and then I'm kind of all over the place, and spend a little bit more time in the water than on the board. So what are some of the tips you would give people to kind of like advance a little bit quicker? As you said, you need a bit of instruction.
No, it's easy for me to say relax. It is,
Yeah.
because when you are on there, and certainly that first time, everybody is so scared of falling in. But actually, they always say the more you fall in, the better paddler you be, because I think once you've got a couple of those falling ins out of your system, you're not going to drown, you're not going to hurt yourself, you can get back on your board, and you instill that confidence. That, in a sense, for me, is that foundation to know, do you know what, you are going to be all right. And I think as long as you've got, it's probably not so bad with you where you're based down in Brazil, but up in here, you need a good wetsuit.
Yeah.
You need some good footwear to make sure that you're nice and warm. But that ability to know you're okay when you do fall in, that you sort of learn from that, in a sense, and relaxing into it, keeping just soft knees, think about your presence, think about where you are on the board, think about your body, think about really looking up, so not looking down at your feet, looking ahead, and just having a bit of confidence in yourself, in your surroundings, and just sort of going with the flow with it. And it should just, the more you do it, the more natural in its sense it does become. But like everything, it's practice, it's getting out there, it's doing it. And I, all through lockdown, when I couldn't paddle, I was still on my wobble board, or I was doing my weights and sort of just trying to keep my eye in really on your balance. But it's such a great sport for your core, for your strength. I've suffered from bad backs, and all of that is so good. And just thinking about your posture, keeping really upright and straight with those soft knees is just so good for you. So yeah, that would be my advice, is just get out there and do it, really, and have fun, but prepared to get wet.
Yeah, definitely. So what's the kind of progression? So like, now you said like over 18-month period of time, you're kind of like really now at the very end of all the courses. So someone now's gone, I really like this, I've done the basics, now I can stand up very comfortable. So what's their progression now? So what's the next steps?
Well, I've been really fortunate in that short space of time, really, to have some excellent sort of coaches and mentors and people that have sort of helped me on my sort of journey. And I was actually thinking about it a week or two ago, and I remember having lessons actually when I began with a chap called Ant, and he's really big into his white water paddleboarding, and some of the stuff that he was doing down the rivers and the rapids was just insane. It just blew your head away, and you're thinking, like, how can anybody even do that in a canoe, never mind on a stand-up paddleboard? And he was a great instructor, and I remember going with him, and I must have had about 3 or 4 months where every week I was going for a lesson. And then having a bit of a chat with him and saying, look, and I don't really know what I want to do next, and I feel like I've kind of reached my sort of limit now with the social paddles and what I was doing with him. And his advice to me was, he said, Kaz, just go away for a few months and just go and paddle on your own, paddle with your friends, just do whatever you need to do, go and find yourself, find what paddling works for you. And it's interesting because I don't think there really is a complete rule, in a sense of, this is how you hold your paddle, this is the exact technique you must follow. I think there is an element of finding what works for you. And on reflection, that was such a good piece of advice, because I went up, I signed myself up to some like crazy challenges, which I sort of trained for. I found some crazy bits of river, and I thought, right, how am I going to learn? I'm only going to learn by doing it. And there was times I was scared, there was times that I had no idea what I was doing, but the more you do that, the more you then realize that actually this is where I need to improve. And that sort of element of sort of reflection then made me think, oh, actually I do want to kick on with it, I do want to take it to another level. So I've done some courses with British Canoeing, but for me, I've sort of gone down the route with the Water Skills Academy, who've been absolutely fantastic. And I've done so many things with them. I've done my coastal navigation, my sort of safety and rescue. Then I went and did my adventure guide training and had my assessment to be a qualified adventure guide. So that was kind of my journey. But I think people can, I suppose, dial it up or dial it down depending on what they want to do. And if it is just a case of doing some lovely little trips at a weekend and just having the confidence, it might just be worth going on a sort of a basic sort of introductory adventure kind of course, or something maybe about coastal nav, or something to do with your rescue, just so you've got those key skills really to deal with maybe problems or times of emergency. But that would be really adequate, if you wanted to just go out and do some good sort of weekends of adventure. But again, it's really horses for courses, and it's what people want to do. So for me, it would be showing people, taking people out on weekends. They could come out with me, and what I really want to do is kind of offer more than just the lessons. So people sort of said, look, we want to go on maybe 1 or 2 day adventures. I'd say, right, come with me and I'll sort of guide you on those. So it's just been a crazy journey, but as you say, you can dial it up or dial it down depending on what you want really out of the sport.
So maybe you can talk a little bit about a stand-up adventure, because I never really thought about that. Like, I've obviously seen an adventurer who's decided to paddle across some ocean or something like that, but I'd thought that was a once-off. And then what I'm accustomed to is seeing people just like paddling around the beach. But now you've added another dimension. So maybe you can talk a little bit about that, because I'd never really thought about it.
Okay, well, I've done a couple. So last summer, went out and did, I think, 25k one afternoon, and decided to just sleep on the riverbank. So loaded everything up onto the front of my board, and I've got a couple of sort of 60-litre waterproof bags, a bivvy, threw in my little camping stove, sort of some overnight stuff and my sleeping bag, and off I went, strapped it all on the front of my board, and then just went down and thought, right, where is a lovely riverbank to sleep? And found a spot, camped over, threw all my kit back on in the morning, and carried on another 20 kilometers down the river. And for me, I think there's a huge potential really to do more of those kind of trips and adventures. And it could be on rivers, it could be at sea, it could be just a really nice lake that you paddle into the bottom of. And it's just a totally different way, because you've got to be so clever with your kit. You've got to think about really lightweight. You've got to think about your cooking, thinking about sort of leaving no trace in a sense, and that sort of consideration with the environment. And it's a very, very simple way of actually doing sort of little mini adventures. And for me, it doesn't have to be far away. The river I paddle on is only sort of maybe 10-15 miles away, on a really beautiful stretch where I could paddle for 3 or 4 hours and not see a single person. So that I think, it opens up a whole new world, and that's what really excites me for this year, because all winter I've just been testing out kits and looking at what's the best sort of lightweight camping roll, and investing in a new sleeping bag to kind of do more of these little micro adventures this year.
Okay, brilliant. So so a person's now kind of interested.
Mm-hmm.
What should they be looking for? Like, they're really interested now, they want to go to the next level, they want to buy a board. So the basic things to kind of get started, what should they be looking for?
Well, again, I've always been given some good sort of tips and hints and bits of advice, but sort of a couple of the bits of advice that have really resonated with me would be, always get the best board that you can afford. And there are lots of boards out there, and people think, oh, it's really, great. I've only got a budget of £300, and which is fine, because I appreciate people do have budgets that they've got to work to. But my advice would be, really do try and get the best you can afford, because One of the bits of advice I was given, that it was, you can outgrow your board quite quickly, in a sense of you can get a beginner's board, but as you grow and your capability grows, you'll start getting frustrated that it's not quick enough, or it doesn't have that ability really to offer sort of multiple things, where some boards are just really solely for just having a bit of a splash on a lake. And for me, if you wanted to do more of the adventure stuff, I would definitely recommend getting more of a touring board. So the touring board has a point at the front, so it sort of cuts through the water. It's a bit quicker than sort of a round nose sort of beginners kind of board. They generally are a bit longer, so you're talking sort of 11 foot onwards, really 11 foot, maybe up to 14 foot. Whereas some of the sort of smaller beginner boards, you're talking about 9 or 10 foot, really. So that extra length gives you the opportunity to put more kit onto it. It means you have much more stability. And again, that they're generally a bit wider, so they're about 30, 31 inches. So again, you plenty of room for your kit. So certainly if you were thinking about going down the touring route, you've had your beginners experience, you've got over your beginners board. If you really wanted to go that next level, it definitely would be touring. And really, if talking about in sort of UK pounds in a sense, for a beginner's board, you could pick a pretty decent one up for about sort of £350–400, maybe sort of 450. But then if you wanted to go into the next category, which would be the sort of touring category, my board's coming up to 2 years old now, and it's still going strong. They've got a really good resale value, and I paid in the region of £800 for mine, and I paddle that board 2 or 3 times a week for nearly 2 years, and it hasn't let me down. So when you sort of look at it like that, in terms of the value you get from a piece of kit, it's cheaper than a bike. So it's sort of comparable there. And then my other bit of advice would be really invest in a good quality paddle. So when you think about it, the paddle is what is in your hands all of the time. It needs to be a beautiful piece of kit. It needs to be lightweight. It's so crucial that you don't just get a sort of an aluminium paddle, or get it because it was free with the board. Make a real consideration and sort of a concerted effort to get something that's a little bit premium. So if you could upgrade it if it comes as part of a kit, try and upgrade it a little bit. Or also just try and borrow some paddles from, if you've got friends, family, other instructors, find something that works for you. I love my paddles, and for Christmas, I treated myself to a Black Project paddle, which was made in Hawaii specifically for me, and I've had that sort of shipped over, and that paddle weighs 400 grams. Whereas probably a typical paddle could weigh more closer to a kilo. So you just got to think about that is something that could be in your hands for 2, 3, 4, 5 hours, even longer, depending on the length of your paddle. So making sure that you invest in that is important. And then just think about your clothing. Think about some good clothing. Your PFD is really important. People say, you strap to the biggest buoyancy aid. So you've got a board strapped to your waist. And I try and use a waist leash rather than a foot leash. And I'll explain why on that front. But I always paddle with a PFD, so a personal flotation device. And I get, a nice cut one. So making sure that it's quite clear from the arms, it gives you that freedom to move. But for me, it's that reassurance, particularly when I'm doing sort of sea or sort of a bit more sort of dodgy river paddles. It's just that extra bit of buoyancy that gives you confidence. And then the waist leashes, and it's a real interesting one. And a lot of the sort of associations over in the UK have been doing sort of big campaigns really this last 12 months, but try and encourage people to wear their leash. And it's almost like a quick release belt that your leash attaches onto the back of, rather than your ankle, with the thinking being that if you fall off and perhaps there's a tree or maybe a leg of a bridge or something, that your board doesn't go one side and you go the other, and then your legs lower in the water and you can't reach, at least with your leash in a sense, around your waist, you can sort of pull it off and quickly release it. So that's just a piece of safety advice, and something that we're all sort of moving towards in the UK in particular, particularly on moving water. It's very important. So good quality board, the best paddle that you can afford. Think about your safety, so a PFD, a waist leash, and then just good quality clothing that I'm sure, like any hobby, your wardrobe develops. I think from when I started, it was a pair of leggings and some old trainers, and now I'm in a full dry suit. So it just evolves, and it started off a very cheap hobby. It's not anymore.
Okay. So do you have any other tips and suggestions for anyone looking to get into SUP?
No, I think it's just do it. Just do it. I think thinking about it is always worse than doing it, in a sense. So for me, it's go and find a good local instructor, somebody that can give you credible advice and support, and just go and have a few taster sessions, and most importantly, have fun. And the sort of the world's your oyster, in a sense. It really could take you anywhere, and the doors it's opened for me over the last 6 months have just been incredible.
No, awesome. So, well, now tell us a little bit about SUP Lass Paddle Adventures. So, what's the plan? What are you hoping to achieve, and what kind of experiences are you looking to give your, final clients?
So a little bit about SUP Lass, and the name. I'll start it off with the name and sort of how it came about. So I've always been one for a side hustle. So I love a little side hustle. I've always got a side project on the go. And before SUP Lass, I was also known as Fodder Lass. So I ran a very successful wedding and events sort of outdoor kitchen business. And I sold that business probably coming up about 2 years ago. And actually it kind of corresponds to me getting into SUP, because it meant I had some weekends and time free that I wasn't feeding other people. So the last bit kind of came across. So from Fodder Lass came across to SUP Lass. And then it just kind of evolved, and everything now is just the world of SUP Lass. So the business, we sort of kicked it off just after Christmas. So I wanted to make sure I had all my formal qualifications. So I wanted to do everything really properly and above board. So got my instructor's qualifications, sorted all my insurances out. And obviously with lockdown, with COVID, it was a good time to sort of plan and build some ideas. And the opportunity I've seen is less so for beginners. So and don't get me wrong, I'll take beginners out, and I've got people sort of booked with me for lessons. But where I really ultimately want to go with it was last year in particular, there was a huge rise of people buying their own boards, getting their own kit, coming into the sport for the first time, getting those maybe beginner lessons. And I wanted to be at the next level, in a sense that I could try and give them that bit more. So it's kind of SUP plus more, really. So not just the paddling, but thinking about other experiences that could run alongside the SUP. So is it elements of introducing food, or could it be putting in a sort of a paddle and a pedal, so introducing a bike? So it's trying to add sort of different dimensions to the world of paddling, other than just the sort of standard paddling, and taking people maybe to locations that they wouldn't be comfortable perhaps taking themselves to, but with a guide and somebody with a bit more experience would sort of give them that confidence then maybe to make those journeys themselves in the future. So it feels like a natural progression, and it feels right, and it feels in a sense what the SUP sort of industry needs, really. It's that sort of next level up. So yeah, that's kind of where I am, and I've got boards arriving this week from Germany, so I'm super excited. I've been waiting for those now for a couple of months, so they're landing this week. I've got my paddles sorted out. I've been doing a bit of coaching for another paddleboard instructor, just to sort of keep my eye in, and so it'll all be sort of ready to go. So my plan is to kind of not bombard it. I think less is more, and maybe just offering maybe 1 or 2 adventures quite exclusive, different adventures per month between probably May through to October, and sort of drip feed them out really to sort of get people's sort of appetite for them and see where it goes. But yeah, it's that and balancing a full-time job as well.
Okay,
So, yeah.
cool, awesome. So if there's one reason why someone should at least give stand up a try, what would it be?
Well, if for me, I would say stand-up paddleboarding has given me the space, the time, and the opportunity to actually have an empty mind. And I think if that could be something I could offer anybody else, I think that would be so valuable. You know, when you think of how hectic our lives are, you know, how tough it's been with COVID, all of these real difficult situations we've all been through over the last sort of 12, 18 months. I think the ability to go on a board down a river with nature, and it is, Damien, I can only describe it as when I'm paddling, I have nothing in my head, and it's one of the few times that you get that. So I think to be able to give that to other people, and I think other people would appreciate the value of that, that you just don't think, and I think that's such an important thing in this day and age.
No, awesome. So you're obviously someone who's passionate about the outdoors, having adventures. So what would you say to others, you know, why you should actually incorporate more time outdoors, more new experiences, more adventures in your life?
Well, I think quite simply, it makes you feel alive, doesn't it? I think because if you don't, what are you living for in a sense? And these little, as you say, it could be half an hour outside at lunchtime, a quick jog around the block, or it could be jumping in the van and going finding a river and paddling down it for 40, 50 kilometers. It's all of these little things that really do make you feel alive. And you know, particularly if you've got a busy job or you've got family life, you just need these moments to be able to get out and appreciate what's there and what's around you. And an example of it being on Sunday, I paddled the Mowddach estuary down in Barmouth. And this estuary is an estuary where mountains come down into the sea. And it's an estuary that I've looked at since I was a very little girl. And I thought, wow, you know, what would that be? And you think it's dangerous, I'm never going to be able to do that. And on Sunday, I paddled it. And I've just got the vision of me stood in the middle of that estuary, all the mountains coming around, nobody around me, and just feeling alive and kind of at one and thinking, actually, this is what being is all about. And it's those moments that just bring you so much fulfillment and happiness and joy. So I think that for me is what paddleboarding gives and what being in the outdoors gives. And I think we all deserve a right to experience that for sure.
Very cool. So last question, a question I like to ask everyone. So what's your definition of living your best life, or what I call a legend life?
I think for me, it's looking back, and I think we all have them, those moments where they're almost like freeze frame moments in your mind, where it could be you on a board, it could be on top of a mountain, it could be in the middle of a lake somewhere. And it's those little moments that create those photographic memories. And I think we all have them. And I think if you can scroll back and have half a dozen of those photographic, amazing, living your life to the fullest memories, I think you've done incredibly well, and nobody can ever take those away from you. And for me, I think that really is living your best life when you've got some of those. And they can be so incredibly simple, cost next to nothing or free. It's just that little bit of creativity and that ability to just say yes and do it. And I think that's all I can really say, Damien.
No, it's brilliant. Well, thank you very much, Caroline. It's been great talking to you. I think a lot of people will get a lot of value out of this. So how can people find you online and learn a little bit more about stand-up or SUP Lass Paddle Adventures?
Well, I'm pretty active on Instagram. So if you have a look on Instagram, you can always find SUP Lass with SUP_Lass. And I've also got suplass.com. So I've got my website and my sort of paddle adventures that I'll be launching later this year. But yeah, always happy to have a chat or drop me a message, an email. All my contact details are on the website. But always happy to offer advice and support. And if it's about kit or just general questions, please feel free to drop me a line and I'll help where I can.
Brilliant. Well, thanks again. It's been a pleasure talking to you.